Alex had always been fascinated by forgotten history. A journalist by trade, he found a unique thrill in uncovering the hidden tales of lost places, places that seemed to have vanished from the world, leaving no trace behind. His latest obsession was an obscure village that had somehow disappeared from every map over 100 years ago, known only as Harrow Hollow. He had found it while sitting in the dim-lit corner of the local library one rainy afternoon. The library smelled of mildew and old paper, and the quiet murmur of the storm outside only seemed to add to the sense of isolation he felt as he pored through old, yellowed maps and documents. The map that caught his eye was old and torn, the edges ragged as though it had been folded and refolded countless times. There were no clear streets or routes marked on it, only a series of cryptic symbols and strange scribblings. At first glance, it appeared to be just a forgotten relic from another time. But something about it struck him, and as he examined it further, he realized it was showing the location of a village, Harrow Hollow, that had disappeared from every modern map. It intrigued him like a secret no one else had dared to uncover. He found a handwritten note scribbled at the bottom of the map, barely legible. "Do not seek what is lost." The words seemed to echo in his mind, a faint warning. But instead of deterring him, they only sparked a deeper curiosity. This was no ordinary ghost story or abandoned settlement. This was a village that had been deliberately erased from existence. The mystery alone made Alex's heart race. He was determined to discover what had happened, to uncover the truth of Harrow Hollow, no matter the cost. Alex packed a bag with his camera equipment, flashlights, and enough provisions to last him for a few days. As he stuffed his journal into the bag, he felt a mix of excitement and dread swirling inside him. This was what he did. He uncovered hidden histories. This was his calling. Little did he know his journey would lead him into a nightmare. The rain had started falling heavier as he drove out of the city. The weather mirrored the unease that gnawed at him. The storm was relentless, the windshield wipers working overtime as he navigated the twisting roads. The dark, wet roads seemed endless, and the deeper he drove into the countryside, the more isolated he became. The towns grew fewer, the lights dimmer, until finally, he was driving on a narrow, winding road that seemed to have no end. He checked the map again. Harrow Hollow was close now, just a few miles down the road. But just as the thought crossed his mind, the engine of his car sputtered and died. Alex tried to restart the engine, but nothing happened. Panic rose in his chest, but he quickly pushed it down. It was only a minor setback. He knew the village wasn't far, so he grabbed his bag, locked the car, and set off on foot. The rain soaked through his jacket as he trudged down the muddy path. The trees around him were tall, their branches heavy with rain, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to move in the corner of his vision. The air was thick with fog, and a strange silence had settled over the area. The usual sounds of crickets and birds were missing. It felt unnatural, too quiet, as if nature itself was holding its breath. After what seemed like hours, he finally saw it. The village. It emerged from the mist like a dark vision, its crumbling buildings shrouded in fog. The air smelled of rot and decay, and an unsettling chill ran through his body as he stepped closer. The houses appeared abandoned, their windows shattered, doors hanging off their hinges, and yet there was something about the village that suggested it hadn't been completely forgotten. Alex felt a twinge of unease, but he couldn't turn back now. The adventure was too compelling. He pushed forward, stepping into the heart of Harrow Hollow. The village was eerily quiet. The buildings, though dilapidated, had an odd sense of preservation to them, as though someone had been keeping them intact. A large church stood in the center of the village, its stone walls cracked but sturdy. The windows were covered in grime, but the door was ajar, as if inviting him inside. As Alex walked deeper into the village, the weight of the silence grew heavier. His steps echoed against the empty buildings. He tried to shake off the creeping feeling that he wasn't alone. Something was watching him, waiting for him. But what? Who? The thought made his skin crawl. He moved toward the church, the grand wooden door creaking open as he pushed it gently. Inside, the air was cold and musty, the scent of decay stronger now. The pews were covered in dust, but there were fresh footprints in the dirt on the floor, leading up to the altar. Who could still be here? Alex muttered under his breath. His flashlight flickered, casting long, jittery shadows across the room. His heart raced as he walked down the aisle toward the altar. The whispers started faintly, barely audible at first, then growing louder, more distinct. Alex stopped in his tracks. The whispers seemed to be coming from the walls. Number, from beneath the floor. He bent down, his hands trembling, and found a loose floorboard near the altar. He pried it up, revealing a dark, narrow space beneath the church. The whispers grew louder. Then, just as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. Dead silence. Alex stared into the hole beneath the floor, unsure of what to do next. He wanted to leave, but something compelled him to continue. Whatever was beneath the church, whatever secret the village held, he was getting closer to it, and he couldn't stop now. He knelt down, his hand gripping the flashlight as he shone it into the dark void. His breath caught in his throat when he saw it. Old yellowed bones scattered across the floor beneath the church, wrapped in torn cloth. It was a burial site, but the bodies were disordered, as if someone had tried to hide them. A chill ran down his spine. He jumped back as the floorboard above the bones shifted and creaked. Something, or someone, was there, and it was moving. Alex's instincts kicked in. He ran, the flashlight swinging wildly in his hand as he dashed out of the church and back into the village. But the village had changed. It was no longer empty. Figures moved in the shadows, tall and thin, their eyes hollow and staring. They were dressed in tattered clothing, their faces pale, eyes sunken. They watched Alex with cold, lifeless expressions, as if they had been waiting for him. The air grew thick and oppressive, suffocating. Alex felt as if the village was closing in on him, trapping him in a nightmare that wouldn't let him escape. He stumbled down the narrow, dark streets, heart racing as the village seemed to twist and turn around him. Every time he turned a corner, it felt like the village had rearranged itself, the paths leading him back to the same haunting spots. The more he tried to find his way out, the deeper into the village he went. Then, as he passed an old tavern, a figure stepped into his path. It was a woman, her face hidden in shadows, but her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice a low, raspy whisper. "Leave now, before it's too late." But Alex didn't listen. He needed answers, and he was determined to find them. The woman stepped aside, her cold, empty gaze following him as he continued forward. The whispers returned, louder now, filling his mind with their unintelligible murmurs. The fog thickened, and the figures in the village began to close in around him. They didn't move, not yet, but their presence was suffocating. He ran again, desperate to escape, but his legs were growing heavy, his energy draining. He couldn't outrun the village. It had already claimed him. Alex reached the edge of the village, where he had first entered, only to find the path blocked by a wall of fog. The way out was gone. He was trapped. Harrow's Hollow had found him. As the figures drew closer, Alex understood what had happened to the villagers of Harrow's Hollow. They had never truly left. The village was not abandoned, it was hidden. The villagers had become part of it, bound by a curse, trapped in the endless cycle of silence and decay. And now Alex would join them. The fog swirled around him, and the whispers grew louder still until they were deafening. Then everything went dark. The village of Harrow's Hollow was never found again. Some say it still waits, hidden by time and shadow, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to search for its dark secrets. The map that Alex once carried. It vanished, as if it had never existed. Some places, it seems, are not meant to be uncovered. They are meant to be forgotten. And Harrow's Hollow remains a secret, lost but never gone.